Well, hey everybody, what's going on? What we're going to do today is a little bit of repair slash maybe refurbishment on this Dyson DC 25. It's the all floor model, so I guess it does carpet, tile, wood floors, all that kind of stuff. We acquired this thing for $0. Got it from my neighbor's mother who was doing a garage sale. And when we got this thing and got it back home, I tried out some of the attachments and it was making a horrible screeching sound, like a really loud kind of whistle. And what it turned out was that there was a Glade, one of those little cartridge air freshener things that was stuck in there, and I was able to pull that thing out. So overall, though, the vacuum cleaner has, well, I guess we could call it just some battle wounds. Also, the button here that you press that opens the bottom of the container, if you look a little bit closer, it's not pressing down on that because it's out of its slot, and so it doesn't allow the bottom container to open. So what we'll need to do is kind of take care of that, repair some of that stuff. Also, we'll want to just clean up, do some general cleanup on the canister, do some cleanup on the vacuum itself. And I think overall, it's probably a pretty decent thing. Now, turns out I did have to put a little bit of money into that, and this isn't going to be necessarily a super in-depth cleaning or repair video on this, I guess you could say. So I'm just kind of bringing you along with me, and we won't necessarily be going step by step too much, but we will kind of go over some of the major things here. And like I said, that it does have some paint that these things, when they get scraped up against the wall and the baseboards, but that stuff actually, it comes off pretty quick. So let's take a little bit closer look at the canister and we'll see kind of what's going on. So here you can see that the little lever is supposed to go down into that slot. And again, that is what allows you to open the canister from the bottom. And it's a relatively easy fix. So if you pop this open here, you'll see that you have a washable filter that you can use over and over again. And this is the original Dyson filter. I think on this particular model they still make them on some of the older models, and I think this particular model maybe came out, 2008, something like that. So I'm not exactly sure how old this model is. But to get that top part off, what we'll need to do is loosen those 3 screws that you see in there, and then that will allow me to kind of move and take some of that plastic pieces, the red plastic piece off, and I'll be able to realign the hole there. So the majority of the screws are Torx screws, and they are T15s. And most of this stuff, when you're looking at Dysons, and with the limited experience that I have, most of the Dyson stuff only kind of goes on one way, so it's going to be a little hard for you to mess stuff up. So if you're jumping in for the first time, just kind of take note of where things went and the order that you take them off. And like I said, most of this stuff, it's only going to go in one way. And I am not sure this thing that I'm taking off here, I don't know, maybe some of you guys know and you can leave it down in the comments. I don't really know what the purpose of that thing is. I'm sure it serves some purpose or else they wouldn't have done it, but I have no idea what it is. So we'll jump forward with a little bit more disassembly. And the plastic handle pops off pretty easily. And in putting it back down, all I did was just relocate it, and that handle just, when you get it back on, it goes right in, and then we just tighten it back up, and you're pretty much done with that. So again, that's back in the hole, and you just go ahead and press down on it and it'll pop the canister. So the canister itself, I'm going to go ahead and clean it up a little bit. And what I'll do is I'll just take the air hose, take it outside, and just kind of hose it off. Blow some air through it. And as you can see here, it is quite dusty. And I end up later taking it a little bit more apart, but not too much. So right in there are the vacuum chambers, or not the vacuum chambers, the cyclone chambers. And just as a quick note, I like to use this old desk drawer organizer. And what it allows me to do is I can keep the screws that go on certain parts, I can kind of keep them together. And that way I know, oh, these screws go here, and I don't get them mixed up. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and speed this stuff up here. It's a little bit more disassembly. Won't make you sit through the whole thing. And again, this is part of that latch assembly, I guess we'll call it for lack of a better term. And you do have the spring, so you just want to keep those together. You have a gasket here that helps seal it. Sometimes if you've got an older model like this, they can be torn, and you can either get a replacement or just get some tape. Now we showed before the filter, there is another filter which is a Hepa filter that is inside the ball, and it's a little tricky to get to, but not too bad. So once you get that ball cover removed, then you just wiggle the filter out. And it's washable as well, so you can reuse it over and over. What I'm doing here is just taking the sole plate off and doing a little bit of inspection. You've got an end cap there. And I ended up, well, I guess we'll get to that here in a little bit, but pretty much this is just the disassembly here. What you'll want to do is just make sure you get any hair and stuff that's caught into the bristles and inspect it. So I've got that all apart and through here. This is where I believe the belt goes. Now, if you look down here, what had happened was the bottom of the sole plate, which is this part that we're looking at here, had shattered off. And so I end up having to order a new one. The Dyson doesn't, I don't think, make this part new anymore, so you have to find something either off of eBay or maybe an aftermarket part. If you end up going with an aftermarket part, sometimes it doesn't quite fit. Now, what had happened is because the plastic had shattered there, the sole plate and that little gear that I just put down comes as one unit, and that's what turns your brush bar. So if, in my case, you can see all the plastic pieces that are kind of shattered down there, I think what had happened was the end cap had lost the ability to kind of hold on to it, and the brush bar kind of wiggled around, and it basically just shattered that. Anyway, the price on that, I think I ended up paying around $15, $16, something like that, to get it shipped out. And actually this kind of refurbishment took a few days to do it because I had to wait on parts to get in. So at this point, it's a couple days later, I'm just going through and washing things up and just giving things a little bit of a scrub. That is one of those, it's kind of the knockoff Mr. Clean eraser things, and it'll take that paint stuff right off the plastic. So again, I did disassemble the canister and everything again and just got everything cleaned up. Like I said, I'm not exactly sure why that's in there, why it's designed the way that it is. But there is kind of a hole in there. Again, I'm not sure why it is. So luckily my gasket's in pretty good shape, so I was able just to put that stuff back on. Now, one thing, when you are going through and doing the cleaning and reassembly, you want to make sure that all this stuff is completely dry before you turn the vacuum on and do a test. You can reassemble it, and realistically, when you reassemble it, you also want to make sure if you've washed it, if you've done some soap and water stuff on there, that it's actually everything is pretty dry. So you let it air dry for a couple of days. So again, a lot of this stuff is just the reverse of taking it apart. And with the plastic, and you're using the metal screws, just make sure that you don't over tighten them. Sometimes you can strip them out. So like I had said, I had to order the new sole plate, which is SOLE, and you can see on that one that you have the gear that's going to turn your belt on there. So again, that cost about 16 bucks. Couldn't find one brand new, had to order one. This is an end cap, and we're just going to do a little bit of reassembly. And what I found was a little bit later is I actually had to order another end cap because it was missing I guess maybe a plastic retainer tab that goes on the bottom there. And to put this thing back together, it goes together a certain way. And a lot of what I found was easier for me was I would kind of make sure that everything was lined up, just put in a top screw, and then go ahead, and I had to take that end cap off to get the brush bar back in. So with my thumb, what I'm doing is I'm pressing up on, I guess we'd call it the tension bar for the belt, and this is what is going to run your brush bar. It's got a separate motor like I believe most Dysons have, and it's not too tricky. It goes back on pretty well. I think I'd mentioned earlier that some parts you can get brand new and some you can't. What we're going to want to do here is we'll turn this on. It's probably going to be pretty loud, so what I will probably do is just go ahead and lower the volume here. But we just want to make sure that the brush bar is turning, that it doesn't seem to be any strain, that there's no strain on the individual brush motor, or that we're not hearing anything kind of weird coming from the main motor here. So I'll go ahead and push that on right now. Alright, what we're going to see here is that I turn the brush bar motor on and off. Dyson makes it to where you can turn the motor off, and if you want to use it primarily just as a suction machine, you don't want to run the brush bar, maybe you're doing hardwood floors or something like that and you don't necessarily need it. So we make sure that it turns on and off, and it does that. And so everything is pretty good here. Now, what I want to talk about next is this end cap piece here, and I will kind of explain to you guys what I think happened. And earlier we saw all that plastic that was shattered off in that gear piece, I guess we'll call it for lack of a better word. Anyway, the brush bar slots into the bottom of that end cap on one end, and then it's got the gear shaft on the other end. And with that missing piece there, I don't think it allows the brush bar to sit in there correctly. And I think that what happened was that over time this caused maybe some fatigue to build up on the other end of the brush bar housing, or I guess of that, I don't even know what the part is called. We'll just call it maybe like a gear shaft for now. So I think what happened is once that plastic piece was gone, it allowed the brush bar to kind of wiggle and move around, and it didn't hold it in securely. And over in here, again, that caused heat and fatigue and vibration, and that's what caused those pieces to shatter. At least that's what I think, because I think it allowed it, again, to go off kilter a little bit. And since that's all molded and it can only take so much stress, and then that wasn't housed in here properly, and that's what I think caused that gear shaft end piece to fail. So I ended up getting a new end cap piece. I got it off of eBay, and I went ahead and spent that. I think I spent $6 on it, I think is what I spent. And I figured, well, I'll just go ahead and do that, and that way it makes sure that the whole vacuum will run correctly. So on that piece, if you want to go back, you can freeze frame it and see if you can get the original part. A lot of times on the end caps, I couldn't find it. I ended up getting it from a guy who had it. But let me show you here real quick. You'll see that little kind of gray T, and that's the piece that was missing. And I couldn't find just that piece. And again, you'll see, let me show you how this thing kind of slots in. And it's like most of this stuff, it's a little fiddly, but it goes in, and you can see that it will hold that brush bar securely. It's not going to let it really wiggle around and move around. And you just take a screwdriver or a coin, and you can go ahead and secure that, and then hopefully that will give you kind of the proper alignment and everything that you need to make sure that that brush bar stays safe. So what we have here is our Hepa filter, and it goes inside there, and it slots in pretty easy. Sometimes it can be a little fiddly, but just take your time with it and it will work out just fine. As with most of the Dyson stuff, it really will only go in one way. And like I said, it's a little fiddly, but it should just slot in, and then once it goes in, it clicks in there with that little red tab, and you're good to go. The next step will be to just put this cover back on, and again, sometimes just the nature of how it sits in the upright position, it can again be a little tricky, but it's not too bad. And it's one of those things kind of where once you've done it a couple of times, you sort of learn the tricks of it and the secret of it. But you just want to have a little bit of access to it. And again, the tab here slots back in there. And all I did was just push that down and then push it forward, and it will go in, and it just clicks right in. And then you're good to go on that. So there we go. We'll go ahead and pop in the new filter, and then let's do a test of the vacuum. Okay everybody, for a machine that we've only got $25 in, it's a pretty good deal. I think it vacuums and picks up stuff fairly well. If I were to compare it maybe to the DC-17, of course that is so much bigger, and I think it has a bigger motor, and it has, I think it has much more suction. However, they are kind of different machines. So something like this, I think, would be perfect if you had an apartment or a smaller home. If you have a lot of tile, this is supposedly something that can do both tile and carpet or hardwood. And I think I mentioned before, I've only got about $25 into it, so for that, it's not a big deal. I don't know that I would want to pay, even for a working model out the gate, I don't know that I would want to pay more than probably 50, 60 bucks for something like this on the used market, and that would be assuming that it would work. I have seen these listed as a full working unit on eBay, going upwards of around anywhere from $120 to $150, and then sometimes you still have to pay shipping on top of that. So anyway, what we'll do is I will come back, and maybe on a future video, I think what I'll do is I will do maybe a comparison and contrast of the DC-17, which is my other one, and the other video that I've done, and I'll compare it to the DC-25.